Hello everyone and welcome back people to more Arsenal chat here, and I wanted to reflect on how things are at the moment, people, because Arsenal have had a disappointing week and we're licking our wounds after two consecutive Premier League losses have resulted in a drop in our league position from first to fourth in the space of 1 week. And it has been a little bit alarming, a little bit concerning what we've seen from the Arsenal over these last two matches. Now, the West Ham match, Arsenal dominate possession, we fashioned some opportunities, we had 30 shots on goal, but to no avail. And whilst we were somewhat in control in terms of possession, I would argue that our territory in terms of where we were able to have that possession was actually not in the most threatening areas, and West Ham were able to keep us at arm's length and ultimately hit us on two well-sprung moments, one in which was a counter-attack where Bowen hooks in a cross, and after a ricochet Souček is there to convert, and then a header from a corner, and ultimately Arsenal didn't quite have that invention, that crispness, that speed in their play to open West Ham up. And whilst the following match against Fulham followed a slightly different pattern, it was similar in the sense that Arsenal lacked a sense of consistent pressure or that ability to cut Fulham open. It was all a little bit ponderous, it was a little bit pedestrian. And this is becoming a little bit of a theme, people, with Arsenal. It is this lack of speed and progression through the phases. So it seems to take us a little bit of a roundabout, inefficient way of getting from our defensive third to the attacking third. There's a lot of sideways passes, people receiving the ball, deliberating, weighing up options, laying off a square pass, the next person receives it, looks up, maybe not much is happening because by that stage the opposing team has had time to set their defensive structure, and the move tends to break down. It's almost like a game of drafts where, I don't know if you guys have ever played that board game, where the front half of the board is so blocked that you end up having to move the pieces at the back because your opponent has successfully stopped you from advancing. And it felt a little bit like that in a draft or a chess game. We just weren't able to make those progressive moves. And it does lend the question of perhaps why this is happening. So why are Arsenal seemingly struggling to break lines? Why are we struggling to breach defences? Why are opposing teams able to set up against us in such a way that is negating our attacks and negating our attacking threats? The players who last season were able to really cause defences no end of problems. So I've alluded people in earlier videos to the idea that Arsenal are playing a slightly more reserved, conservative style in order to conserve energy. So obviously last season there was an element of the team running out of a little bit of steam towards the end of the season. So from that standpoint, a slightly more pragmatic and selective approach would make sense. But maybe Arsenal are, I think, lacking in a little bit of confidence. Now, I think, from my point of view, people, I think perhaps the crux of what we're seeing at the moment is a little bit of an elongated hangover from last season and the disappointment and things not quite going according to plan towards the end of the season. I noticed in pre-season in the United States the performances were a tad bitty. They were a little bit disjointed, a little bit unrhythmical. We were struggling for that fluency. And I think it has somewhat translated through the season where we've been trying to find our feet, but we've maybe lacked that sense of real spontaneity and sparkle. And I think that's a symptom of players maybe second guessing themselves, maybe being somewhat indecisive when they're faced with options. So obviously when a player who is essentially tasked with attacking instructions or is placed in an attacking position, when they have almost like a 50-50 moment where they could quickly release a pass, or they could attempt to dribble, or they could deliberate and pass sideways, it's more often than not they're taking that third option, and it's leading to a few too many bottlenecks in our attacking plays. So Saka, be it Martinelli, be it Ødegaard, perhaps three of Arsenal's players who are getting on the ball in attacking positions, maybe aren't just going with that instinctive thought of, my mate's free on the other side, the defender hasn't tracked his run yet, I'm going to ping it now. Instead, they're going, I could pass it to my friend, he's free on the left or the right. Oh, now the option's closed, I could attempt this dribble. Hang on, now the second defender's come across and it's a little bit more difficult now. Okay, I'll go with the third option, which is pass. Rather than, and you look at Liverpool when they spring attacks, it's, okay, Salah's free, ping. Salah's like, okay, Darwin Núñez is free in the box, outside of the foot cross. Núñez is free, he'll put it into the back of the net. It's like Liverpool are seeing the moment and they're killing it. We are seeing moments, I think the players are seeing the opportunities, but maybe not quite executing it quickly and decisive enough to cause damage, because as I mentioned, people, the longer you take on the ball, the more time you actually give your opponents to set up and station themselves in a rigid defensive system. So I think that's the problem that we're finding at the moment. So the question is now, for me, what do Arsenal do to remedy this? How are they going to go about fixing this problem? Now, from my point of view, people, I'm a little bit concerned that Arteta hasn't shown us enough signs that he is fixing this, and maybe he's not even showing us signs that he's aware of it, because in press conferences and interviews he'll either give quite non-committal answers, in the sense that he won't really divulge or go too deep into his answers. He won't necessarily give away any tactical strategies that the team are working on behind closed doors. He won't really convey exactly what the strategy and the plan is and how it may be working or not working. And I understand that to an extent, because you don't want to give opponents and opposition managers any insights. But I also wonder if his reluctance to express maybe his misgivings or his uncertainty about the strategy is also indicative of a little bit of a blasé, almost denialist approach, where he's maybe not really noticing and taking on board the shortcomings and maybe why they aren't working. And another aspect that slightly concerned me with Arteta, I think it was before the Fulham game, after the West Ham game, he was asked a question about, are Saka and Martinelli displaying signs that they may be feeling the strain of having to constantly lead the Arsenal attack, and at their age, is it a little bit burdensome for them at this point? And he sort of swatted the question away quite dismissively and almost quite flippantly. He kind of said, they're young, they can deal with it at this stage of their career, you know, they can deal with it, you know. And I kind of thought that's just a little bit too flippant for my liking. I would be a little concerned if that is his stance. So I understand perhaps to the public domain you're not going to always convey how you are approaching things behind closed doors and in the dressing room. But if he is taking this approach of, oh, yeah, they're young, they can just play, I'm kind of thinking to myself, did you not take note of the lessons of last season where Saka and Martinelli and others, I'm not just putting it at their door, but maybe some of the attacking players did run out of a bit of steam. And for me, it's completely understandable that they would run out of steam because they are young players being asked to play week in, week out in a pressurised environment. So I'm thinking to myself, if I was managing these players, I would be a lot more selective about how I use them. And it begs the question then, why is he not using Nelson more? Why is he not using Smith Rowe more? Why is he not using maybe Trossard more? Like, I know there aren't an abundance of options in the wide areas, but you could put Nelson on the right, you could put Trossard on the left, you could put Jesus on the left, play Nketiah through the middle. There are ways with the current squad that you could shift things around a little bit. Maybe, yeah. And I'm just not seeing enough of that. And I'm worrying a little bit that the same patterns are going to repeat themselves in the sense of Saka and Martinelli maybe burning out towards the end of the season. And because Arteta's not put enough faith in the so-called backup options, the likes of Nelson, the likes of Smith Rowe, when push comes to shove and we need to change things through injury or fatigue towards the end of the season, these guys who have been maybe underused are not going to have that sense of confidence or rhythm or fitness to be suddenly asked to perform when they're thrust into it in the latter stages. So I feel like you've sometimes got to roll the dice and think, I know maybe these other options, Nelson, Smith Rowe, Trossard, I'm thinking in Arteta's mind, aren't necessarily my preferred choices, but at some point I do have to rely on them in the hope that my primary options, i.e. Saka, Martinelli, are going to be fresher when it really matters. So in order to optimise the level of Saka and Martinelli, you might have to manage their minutes a little bit more and think, okay, we might have to sacrifice Saka for a game, maybe 60 minutes, maybe take him off after an hour, maybe bring him off the bench for 20 minutes of a game. You might have to do that a little bit more in order to A, preserve their energies and their strength and their confidence, and B, to keep the wheels ticking of your reserve choices, your Smith Rowes, your Nelsons, because when is Smith Rowe going to get this fitness, and when is he going to get up to speed if he's not being used? So you've got to chance your arm a bit, I feel, with some of these second choice attacking options especially, and maybe even Cedric people, like played well in the PSV game in our last Champions League match in that dead rubber. Why not use him a bit? Why not give Ben White a rest, because he's maybe not been at his best? Put Cedric in there at right back. Other options, maybe play Kiwior at centre back a little bit more in his preferred position. I know, and yeah, just reconfigure things a little bit like that. Maybe use Mohamed Elneny a little bit more. Jorginho. These guys are experienced, 30-something years of age. They can do a job. If Mo Elneny plays against a West Ham or a Fulham, I think that's going to invigorate the team for a one-off game because Elneny brings energy. Or Jorginho, they can pass things forward a little bit quicker. Maybe give Rice a rest because he is still a young-ish player, and certainly young in his Arsenal career. If you're sensing maybe he's just having a tricky couple of games, play Elneny instead of Rice in a Fulham match. Something just a little bit different to shake things up, and trust your squad players a little bit more. Because this is something with Arteta I've noticed over a few years. So I know people are putting forward some questions, but ultimately the reason I'm putting these proposals forward is because we have had a couple of losses, and ultimately you do have to explore solutions and reasons, maybe why things have perhaps gone a little bit awry and how they can be corrected. I'm a real believer of Mikel Arteta, people. I still really back him. I've got a lot of admiration for the job he's done at Arsenal over these years, and Arsenal have moved forward under his tenure. But I just want to see a little bit more ownership from him, a little bit more critical thinking and self-reflection, and maybe I want to see him owning that publicly a little bit more of an acknowledgement of the job that he's got to do, and maybe to take on board some of these suggestions that are coming his way about managing game time of certain people and how we maybe become a little bit more of a threat in our attacking play. So, obviously a big match, people, against Liverpool this coming weekend in the FA Cup. We have to be focused on this one, people. I feel like back to our best, we need to come at this game on the front foot and approach it in a very attacking and almost dominant fashion where we're looking to get control of the game, because Liverpool are on good form, and I feel like we need to really ruffle them a little bit with our gameplay at the beginning. I think this is one where we've got to make a statement in terms of how we go about it, because I don't think Liverpool are in the mood to surrender anything meekly. So I think we've got to go out there and win it against Liverpool. So those are my thoughts, people. I'll be interested to hear what you think. And yeah, I'm hoping we can bounce back, people. Certainly believe we can. After the FA Cup, we'll have a couple of weeks just to rest, maybe go away, warm weather training in Dubai, come back, hopefully refreshed. Tomiyasu might be up to speed by that point. Hopefully Timber's a bit closer to a return. Partey hopefully is a bit closer to a return. Smith Rowe hopefully builds a little bit of fitness. All of these factors I want to see in terms of a progression. Before we even look at January transfers, I want to see Arteta managing who's here a little bit better. And yeah, that's what I want to see, people, over these next couple of weeks. So we really come back firing for those Premier League fixtures on the other side of this mini break. But first of all, people, it's Liverpool. Full focus for that. Hopefully we get the win. But yeah, leave me your thoughts, people. We can engage in a bit more of a dialogue on this. All right, people. Peace. Love.